I want to go ahead and welcome you guys to our virtual podcast called Talking Justice, where we discuss social justice issues that are important to our community members. I am one of your hosts. My name is Sasha Leggett. I am the co-founder of Pure Justice as well as the executive director, and I'm joined here by Ro. Do you want to introduce yourself, Ro?
How's it going, everyone? Roshan C. Evans, co-founder of the Pure Justice Organization, college student, political science major, author of 3 books. A lot of you know me because I go around and I talk about my first book called Stolen Identity, where I was actually sucked into the system, which started me here sitting next to Sasha working with Pure Justice.
That's not really how it started, but I mean,
Something
you
like
can
that.
kind of say it started. Me and Ro have known each other for a long time. And so, guys, today we are joined by 2 of our local law enforcement officers. I want to give you guys an opportunity to introduce yourselves and tell us, who you are, what your rank is, and what agency you work with here in Texas.
Okay, I'll go first. Hi, my name is Desiree Stanislaus. I've been in law enforcement for over 10 years. I started off with Harris County Sheriff's Department. I then went on to work 8 years and 8 months with the Baytown Police Department, and now I'm out in Jefferson County doing school-based law enforcement, where I decided I wanted to help the youth. I figured that's where some of our problems and issues start, and if I could get to the root of the problem, maybe I could help stop some of our young Black men and women from entering into the justice system. So I'm trying that out. It's different, but that's where I'm at now.
Yeah, I'm sure it's different. I used to be a high school social studies teacher, and
So you know exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. Okay, Mr. Perry.
Well, guys, my name is Deputy Pierre.
Pierre.
Pierre. I've been with the Harris County Sheriff's Office for the last 2 years. I started off with the Harris County Constables Precinct 4 2 years prior to that, so I have a total of 4 years. This month made me 4 years. Actually, last month. You see, we're so busy that I don't know what my days are. But yeah, I got into law enforcement in 2016. It wasn't something that I ever seen myself getting into. It was one of those things where, I had a son. He's 8 years old now, and he looked up to law enforcement. And of course, around that time, we had a lot of stuff going on, so I was kind of weary about getting to law enforcement. But I wanted to be some kind of a role model to kids, and especially to my son. So I figured, hey, why not be something that he looks up to? And now he looks up to me every day. So I'm here sitting in a patrol car because of my little boy.
Yeah. So you didn't always want to be a police officer?
No, I'm not going to sit here and lie to the people on live. No, I did not. No.
What did you think you wanted to do before?
Well, before then, I was still kind of going back and forth in different jobs. I worked in banking, I worked in automotive, I worked in down to retail, and I just didn't know what I wanted to do. And then I went back to school actually after I became a cop. And now I'm actually in school getting my degree this December. I'll graduate with the criminal justice and a minor in political science, which eventually I want to get into law school because I don't want to be a cop for the rest of my life. I'm just going to be honest. And hopefully I can get into law school and see where we go from there.
That's nice. I just want to say, I actually met Pierre and Desiree in school. We were taking courses online, and this is the first time I actually get the opportunity to actually meet each other, not really in person, but virtually. So I think it's exciting to actually finally meet y'all for the first time. They were some of the students in the class.
That's definitely.
Desiree, did you always want to be a police officer? Was that your trajectory?
No, it wasn't. No. Initially, I wanted to go to law school. I had my son at a young age, so I had to do something quick. Went to school, got my associates, got into law enforcement, and now I'm back in school finishing my bachelor's, so I also can go back to law school and do what I set out to do 12 years ago.
Okay, so all y'all want to be lawyers, or like
Yes.
my graduate professor told me, you want to be a professional liar, is what he told me when I wanted to go to law school.
Professional liar. That's what they call us. Well, lawyers.
Yeah.
So, throughout our course of life, we have tendencies to always we always going to experience certain things. Like we all going to experience some of the same things, no matter where you from, who you are, or where you at in life. And one of them is racism or sexism. And I want to know, have you ever experienced racism or sexism on the job?
For me,
start-
yes,
Ladies first.
definitely. Yeah. I tell people all the time, it's tough being Black. It's tough being a Black female. It's tougher to be a Black female in uniform. So yeah, I get it all the time. The guys at work thinking that I can't do the job that they do because I'm a woman. I get the dirty looks because of the people that I know, that I went to school with, that I'm still cool with. Just because they chose a different path in life and I chose this path, I'm still gonna be who they know me to be. The badge didn't change me. And so yeah, I've suffered both while at work from the hands of my coworkers, yes.
Yeah.
And you, Pierre? Jerry? I think it's frozen.
Just think froze.
He might
So-
have to come back in.
So
There he is.
there you go.
Well, I could speak on also, even with touched up on what she says. Can you hear me?
Yeah, a little. You kind of going in and out.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Well, I've seen sexism on the job
Jerry,
before
you kind of real choppy. We can't hear you.
because of women in law enforcement. They looked at it,
Jerry?
just like being in the military. Like, oh, you can't hold up to being. I'm going in.
Yeah, you're really choppy. We can't hear
Let
you.
me see.
You might have to sign in and sign back in. But I mean,
You got
Oh. So if you want to sign out and sign back in,
you hear me?
No.
okay. So
You hear me now?
No,
no,
you sound like a robot.
we can't. You might have to sign out, and then we'll sign you back in.
mhm. So Desiree, I'm gonna come back to you real quick. So we can get his mic together. But if you
Okay.
experience racism and sexism on the job, have you ever experienced racism or sexism from watching other law enforcement officers to citizens? And how did you handle it?
Yes.
It don't even have to be in the current job. It could be over your
Right.
yeah.
Yes, I've seen it more times than I've wished to have seen it. Honestly, when I first started out in law enforcement, because you don't know, like, if you speak out on something, what the retaliation is going to be. So for a while, I just observed and I documented. And I observed and documented, like in my own little journal. But I never spoke out on it. I never said anything. Well, once I got comfortable and I realized, I could say something, and even if they retaliated, I could hold my own. That's when I started to let them know that's not cool. Like, bro, you don't have to use those words. You don't have to deal with them like that, talk to people like that. They're human beings just like us. And for the most part, yeah, they would chill when they were in my presence. Now, what they would do outside of my presence, I don't know, but I nipped it in the butt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think sometimes when you're in a situation, you don't really know how you're going to respond. You know, I don't know if you guys know this, but like I've gone to law school, you know, and I've worked in the legal field, and I've had experiences where I've seen people make comments or jokes to where originally I think you might come across a little bit more timid until you start to feel like it's my obligation to say something. It is my
Right.
obligation, you know, to uphold the integrity, you know, of what it is that I said I was coming here to do, and that also
Right.
speaking out or calling people out or calling them in or whatever terminology we want to call it, to say, hey, this is a problem, right? And it creates a lot of these divides that we're starting to see. Some of the stuff that we're seeing in the media where there's just this massive amount of divide and, you know, a massive amount of trust issues. And a lot of it comes from, you know, those kinds of incidences, whether it's all the time, sometimes, or the one time and it got caught on camera. Well, if nobody sees it being addressed, nobody hears it being, you know, reprimanded or anything like that, people start to question, right? Like, well, if nobody's gonna say nothing, they're gonna keep doing this. And if they keep doing this, what does that mean for me, right?
Right.
Community member or civilian. So I think it's good to say, you know, I might not be able to control the whole force, but if you do it in my presence, I'm going to say something.
Right.
Because I think what we're seeing is just people feeling like there's a lot of biases. And that's something that we want to ask you about. Do you feel like there are law enforcement practices that are carried out in a racially biased way in your experience as an officer? Have you experienced that?
Yes.
Yeah.
But it almost feels like, and some of my classes that I've taken last semester in school, it actually breaks it down. And so I have a better understanding of kind of why it ends up like that, right? So you have the officers that's always in the poorer parts of town or the Black neighborhoods, whatever, because that's where crime is higher at, right? And so those communities say, well, the officers are always over here, they're always harassing us, but then you say, well, crime is higher here, so we have to have a higher presence, police presence there. So it's almost like it's designed for the police to be in those communities. That's how it kind of feels to me sometimes. Because even when you go in the upper communities, the more wealthier communities, we only get calls out there if someone breaks into their house. We don't get calls out there for anything else. You know?
Yeah.
It looks like, Jerry, you're back on the phone.
Yeah, I had to go on the phone. It seems as though my connection is pretty bad out here.
On video. Okay, well, we can hear you. And so what we wanted to see if you'd like to chime in on some of the issues around like racism or sexism on the job.
Okay.
Yeah.
Earlier I was talking about the sexism because Desiree has mentioned it about females, and I see a great deal with females because it's just like in the military. I believe they still have that militant mindset, you know, that females can't do the job as males can, when that's actually not true, you know. And there's females out here that are actually good cops. They're good policemen. They know how to do the job way better than some of the guys out here that I've seen. And they kind of hold them at a higher standard, which I feel is not fair, you know. And they just, some guys don't respect them as much, you know, just because of the fact that, you know, as far as racism though, at the end of the day, we're still in a society where racism still affects us. We're black. We're black before we put the uniform on. So just like how it was back in the day, where we, we're going to work, we deal with racism in work as well, even though it's probably not talked about, but we do, and I believe it's one of those things where a lot of black officers are probably scared to speak up on, just because, they don't want to get in trouble, fired and stuff like that. But we do deal with it on a daily basis, when it deals with sometimes with promotions, deals with getting into different divisions, and we have to deal with that, believe it or not. It's just the society that we live in, so it's just not, we also deal with it within the police department, not just outside of the police department. Because outside of the police department, once I take this uniform on, I'm a black man. I can get pulled over just like anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
That's right.
Right. And, everybody know you're an African-American black male, but they don't know you're a police officer when you take the uniform off, unless they actually know who you are. And if you all experience racism on the job amongst one another, and you see it, regardless if it's with you or not, it's like, I can just only imagine the racism that we see towards law enforcement and citizens. Like we went over this as well, but it's like, if we're afraid to talk out or talk up on what we see on a job amongst one another, it's like, I can just imagine how much more harder it will be when you actually see racism from a law enforcement brother or sister to somebody in the community. But I know you see it. So when you see it, how do you handle it?
Right. Well, handling it is speaking up. It's speaking. It's not getting that fear. With us, I believe in documentation holds a lot of weight. As far as documenting anything that you may experience on the job. I've been taught that by higher ups in law enforcement that used to deal with it back in the 80s, back in the 90s, early on to even the 70s. And that's, I have a lot of great mentors, and they even taught me that, a lot of black mentors that is chiefs, captains, sheriffs. And they tell us like, hey, if you experience something like this, make sure you document it and stuff like that. That's the only way it'll be handled correctly. Because once you document something, I can tell you straight up, in law enforcement, they get scared because now it's on paper.
Yeah.
And if it's not on paper, it didn't happen. Then it's your word versus their word, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the way for myself, is how I like to handle situations where I feel I'm being discriminated against, or if I feel that I'm, just not being treated fairly, is documentation, Just like how we tell the public, if you feel something that you feel, on the traffic stop, you felt that you was racially profiled, go and file a complaint. That's your right. You can do that. It's documentation. Because if you don't document it, then it's not like it never happened. You can go and tell all your friends, but that's not really gonna help the situation. Go ahead and file a formal complaint. Yeah.
So, I'm sorry, Sasha, you want to get one? Well,
I mean, you can go. You
okay.
Can go now,
well, it's kind of burning in me, right? So it's like, we been dealing with a lot of oppression for a long time, just racism. And it kind of carried over into some of our systems. And even though we have evolved as a nation and we grow in certain things, it's not the same as 100 years ago, but yet we still deal with racism and nationalism. So when it comes to like law enforcement and the problems the divide between the community and law enforcement, I think a major part of that have to do with nationalism, even though, it's not all white people who do a lot of it's not all white people. How do we deal with nationalism within law enforcement?
Yeah, like the approach, because I think, and not just nationalism itself, but like systemic racism, because there are groups of people who will literally say systemic racism does not exist, period, in general, or it doesn't exist in these particular institutions. Well, we know that that's not true. But how do you, because I know that you guys are saying, well, documentation is one way. If you see something, say something. But what is a different, like, what other approaches can we use to root out these systemic kind of practices to make a better, you know, system, so to speak?
Desiree. Those are tough questions.
That's a tough question. I mean, it's more like thinking big, being idealistic.
Yeah.
And it's kind of
Right.
like, we know it might not happen today or tomorrow, but like, how do we even start this? Because some of this stuff is so deep rooted that where do you even begin?
Like I try to tell some of the people that I have had conversations with. I mean, I just believe in making the change within. You know, I just believe in that. That's just my strong belief. Is, you know, like I said, you know, even for me, it's going to law school, it's getting into the system. We can't do nothing if we're not in the system, right?
Yeah.
So if we're not in the system, we're not in the police departments, we're not in government. How can we expect change? You see, so, you know, I'm all for it. Everyone wants to, you know, have a voice, but we have to have a voice in the courtroom. We have to have a voice when legislation is going on, when all of that stuff is going on, because if there's no voice to speak for us in those seats, then there will be no change.
I agree. Desiree, did you want to add something to that?
I'm sorry, I had another phone call. I'm trying to multitask. Y'all forgive me. I apologize.
For the chance for Desiree.
Okay.
What's that?
Yeah, first, and let her respond to that. No, I was saying, do you want to respond to like how you think we need to address systemic racism or like these deep-rooted issues in our system? And then also we have a question in the chat too.
Okay. Just briefly, I mean, I agree with everything Pierre said. Like, yeah, you got to go out there and vote. It matters who we elect as judges and legislation, and we got to change the laws on the book. And it's so multi-tiered. It's not one thing. It's not two things. It's not three things. It's like so many different areas that have to be reformed in order for us to see any change. It's, you know, everyone keeps saying police training. Okay, police training. And then what? Okay, elect somebody. Okay, we do that. And then what? The bottom line is you can't change the heart and minds of men. How a person feels, how they think is how they're going to react to situations, period. It doesn't matter who's the president. It doesn't matter who's the judge. It starts with the you know, interaction between law enforcement and the community. And so if that officer is going through whatever he's going through, thinking whatever he's thinking, he is the first initial contact. And so before you can even get to the judge, get to the jury, you have to get with law enforcement first, right? And so, I don't know, it's just so many different things. Where do we start? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough thing, right? Because sometimes we get in a situation where these are the only systems that we know.
Right.
Know that they need to be changed, but we also know that the people who help put them in place and keep them in place are going to try to protect them. And the challenge sometimes feels so overwhelming, but something has to change, right? Like something has to happen at some point, or we're going to keep seeing these divides. We're going to continue to see all of this contention. And me personally, I don't want to continue to see the contention. I would like to see, how do we bridge divides, right? How do we redefine public safety in a way that doesn't have to demonize groups, you know? And I think there's validity on, like, the people who are upset, there's valid reasons that they're upset.
I agree.
But what do we do so that they don't feel like, well, you know, these people are not listening to us and act out of frustration, right? So, you know, we can't be afraid to change the system. We have to meet these challenges head on. It's just, where do we start, right?
Where do we start? Yeah.
Yeah. What was the question you had, Rose?
So Desiree, we got a question in the chat box for you from a Quavon Taylor, and it says, have you ever been pulled over by a cop, and what were your initial thoughts running through your mind?
It's funny that that's the question, because I actually made a post very recently, and I say, I know exactly how you guys feel, because when I'm not in my patrol car and I'm not in uniform, I feel the same feeling when I see the red and blue lights behind me. When I get pulled over, I'm nervous too. When I get pulled over, I'm like, oh crap, my heart starts beating fast too. I think it's a natural reaction. It's just a natural reaction to be nervous when you get pulled over.
You think
And then when the
everyone
officer approached, what's that?
Do you think that nervousness is for every individual, or do you think it's more heightened for minorities?
That's tough.
Because I mean, I don't know how to. I don't know.
I'll speak on from being in law enforcement. I believe interacting with, like, I work on the west side, right, of Houston. So and that's Katy. Katy is not as much minorities as we have white people or Hispanics. So I pull over more white, Hispanic. So I would honestly say that I feel like it's more of a, they're heightened just because of the fact that it's the police. It's the red and blue lights. It's just that they're just nervous because they don't know what's going to happen. We pull over people. The thing about it is we pull over people for a minor traffic infraction, but we don't know what's going on in that vehicle, what they're thinking. They could have just, it could be someone that just committed a murder or something like that, and we just pulled them over for a broken tail light. So they're already heightened. It could be little old grandma just came from the great gas station. She's probably just nervous. She's scared, just because she don't want a ticket, so her nerves is already heightened. So she may act a different way and act nervous, So I feel it's just the overall law enforcement, culture of being pulled over. Everyone automatically get heightened and
Yeah, I think so too.
It's just, I think that's just what it is. It's just a culture, of getting pulled over,
Yeah.
Yeah, 'cause I mean, it's a hard question for me. Like I was saying before, I mean, I'm a minority. I don't know what it feels like to be anything other than, and so maybe it's a poll that we can take. Maybe guys, if you're listening and you want to put in a chat, if you are white and you're listening, tell us if you feel nervous when you get pulled over, because I don't know. I know for me, I feel nervous sometimes. I feel nervous not necessarily because I feel like, oh, I just did something inherently wrong. I think I feel more nervous because I feel like something can go wrong even if I've done nothing wrong. And that, like, I want that to not be my feeling. Like, I want to be able to get pulled over. I want to be able to get my citation and move on with my life. I do not want to be nervous out of my ass, sitting at the steering wheel thinking, oh my God, am I gonna be killed today because of, whatever. And that I just feel like it shouldn't be the case. And I don't know.
We're all human. You have every right to feel that way. We all human. We all have those nerves. But even as in law enforcement, we have those same nervous interactions as well, because like I said earlier, we don't know what we're walking up to. So, and I try to tell people when they get pulled over, try not to be so nervous, because that's the number one thing people are going to say, why are you so nervous? If you're nervous to where you're sweating and you got the AC on, it's eight out of 10 times is because something is going, that's a sign of something is not right, and it makes it harder on the job now, I'll say, because of everything which is going on, which is, I'll be honest, like I haven't pulled over nobody in months, because it's just, they're nervous because of the fact that I'm pulling them over. And I don't know if they're nervous because they just committed an offense, or if they're nervous just because they're not sure what I'm going to do. 9 times out of 10, hey, we're just here to give you your citation and that's it. Yeah, I can't speak on all officers, But, you know, 9 times out of 10 for myself, it's just, hey, I'm here to give you your warning. I treat it like this. Hey, you're cool with me, I'm cool with you. That's just how it is, you know. And I think that's what it is.
I think it's obvious it's a conditioning thing, right? So police officers very rarely pull you over to tell you, hey, I love the way you were driving today. Hey, I like your blouse. Oh, I saw that you had your seatbelt on. I'm just pulling you over to say, good job. That's not the case, right? And so, of course, it's conditioned that if you get pulled over by the police, it's not for anything good. Something bad is going to come out of it, whether it's a citation, wasting 10 minutes of your time out of your busy day, whatever it is, it's a negative connotation, right? So it's just a conditioning. I think everyone's nervous when they get pulled over.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's something that we, on both ends, you know, law enforcement has to work on, and the community has to work on, you know. And I try to tell people, I did a panel one time at a church that I go to, and I told people, you know, sometimes it's just relax, breathe, you know, just keep your hands on the steering wheel and just do what he tells you to do. Don't do nothing until, you know, he directs you to, you know. Just especially don't talk back, you know. And that's another thing. Is some of these, we're human, like I said. Some people is gonna take what you say and not gonna retrieve it well. I'm just being honest, you know. There's some cops out here that's just gonna take what you tell them, and they're gonna take it to heart, and that's when things get escalated, you know. And you don't want it to get that way, you know.
All right.
So,
That,
you know,
I understand. I understand that police officers are human, just like civilians are human, and we all got feelings and we all have emotions, you know. But if I have a conversation, because I'm grown, if I'm talking to you, you know, we should be able to have a disagreement to where the disagreement that we're having is you in your capacity, and not you specifically, but an officer in their capacity or on duty should be able to still be objective to say, well, you know, I feel like you and your feelings, but at the end of the day, what the real issue is, this is the citation, or what have you, you know, not saying, now you said something to piss me off and I'm going to respond because I'm pissed off.
Right.
The case.
It should not be the case. It should not be the case, because law enforcement should be held at a higher standard than that. But like I said, I'm not going to sugarcoat nothing. There's people that get in their feelings and they just don't know how to handle that, you know, and they just don't know how to walk away and just give the citation. And that's how things get escalated. And that's when it comes into, you know, that's when training comes into, you know, that comes into. But that's the thing is, like I said, you never know who's getting into any job, not even just law enforcement, until something happens and you're like, well, they were a bad fit. They got an attitude problem. They have mental health issues. They have, you know, all kinds of issues that they shouldn't be in this uniform, you know. But, you know, I wouldn't be real if I didn't tell you there's people out there that does take things to heart, and that's how things get escalated, you know. And
we gotta have the real.
And they gotta be
nobody coming up here just saying any old thing, because I'm gonna be like,
Right. You know.
I will say this though, I think that and I don't know if it's a training thing or a culture thing, but it's definitely a mindset that officers feel like they're superior because they wear that badge, that they're above everyone else. Like, here's the officer and here's civilians. And I think that that's the mindset that we have to change. Officers have to understand that, yeah, we are in a place of authority, but that doesn't mean that we are above anyone else. And so just because you have an attitude, you don't have to listen to me because, like, oh, you pulled me over, so I have to listen to you. Now, I understand what Jerry's saying, but that's the mindset of the civilian. I don't have to listen to you. You know, I'm grown, you grown. So, and then it becomes that power struggle. Oh, I'm an officer, you have to listen to me. Well, I'm grown, you have to listen to me. And so I think that if officers just calm down some and realize, yeah, I'm in a place of authority, but that doesn't mean I have to like puff up my chest. I think things will go over a lot better.
Right. And that's exactly what
in that situation. Because I could say, well, like if you go into a courtroom with me, I'm the person in authority, or the judge is the person in authority, or still need to be
respectful.
That hey, we're dealing with, you know, real people, real situations and circumstances, and we're gonna sometimes have to put our feelings to the side. Now, what I'm
Right.
advocating for is for people to just be outright disrespectful and nasty, because that will provoke anybody. I'm telling you right now, if you come at me yelling and cursing and screaming, you might get a negative response.
Right.
Just because that's just who I am, right? And so I'm not saying, I don't think people should do that. But what I'm saying is if it happens and we just having a disagreement, it doesn't give you a right to escalate the situation to anything,
Right.
especially not become physical.
Right. And I always tell people that I'm like my friends, I say, man, listen, the side of the road is not the courtroom. Don't argue with these cops. Don't sit there and argue with them. That's not the courtroom. Then take the citation, go about your day, and then go to the court date and handle it in court. That's it.
Right.
Do not. Because
I agree.
we are in a society where you do have cops they put that badge on every day and they're like, who am I going to mess with today? My chest is high, my chest is big. I was bullied in school, so now I'm gonna go bully some people. There's people like that, you know. So, you know, and I always tell people that do not play courtroom with these police officers on the side of the road. Take your citation, take your warning, and just go about your day and show up on your court day and handle it. You know.
I'm gonna read a comment here. This is from Lloyd Purnell. He says, systematic racism can only be dealt with systematically. You have to get rid of those keeping status quo the way it is. They call people progressive because they want to make change that the powers that be, that they don't want to change, I'm assuming. So they call people progressive because they want to make the change that the powers don't want to change, even though they know it should be. So that kind of drives into the next question. Did you want to comment, Lloyd?
Well, no, I mean, I think he did address that. Like, well, I like that he was answering what we were saying. When we were originally saying, like, how do we address this? And what he's saying is
Okay.
wiping out and getting rid of people who want to keep things as the status quo. The problems sometimes come from why you can't just do it that way. Are there these protections where, like, almost like a professor who got tenure, you can't just get rid of them just because, you know, they ain't keeping up with technology as it advanced. You know, their tenure, and there is a process to get rid of these people. And I think that's the same with law enforcement. You can't, they're not gonna just go and just say, oh, you out of here because you don't want to change or go in a new direction. And so a lot of that's like policy stuff, you know, so you'll have to get people who are very interested and focused on changing the policy so that that's not the case. And it's not always the case, right? Because I think sometimes as younger generation, people will say, if you old, you gotta go. You know, you must be having an old mindset, you gotta get out of here. And that's not always the truth. You know, there's value in having a balance of experience and then also having people who are more progressive in their thinking. That's my personal.
You know, lately it's been a lot of talk about police accountability. You know, as African American Black officers, how do you feel about the officers in the George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, or the Jacob Blake cases? Like, how do you think that they should be handled?
How should they be
For me, I'll go. For me, I'll touch the George Floyd and the Breonna Taylor situation. I like I said, I even posted it. They full extent, time, everything. You know, that's just my opinion. I feel they handled that situation wrong as far as the George Floyd situation. There's one guy, multiple officers. One guy, multiple officers. The officers are in control once they had that man in cuffs. There's no reason, especially with the guy saying he can't breathe. Your duty is to protect. This guy's on the ground. He can't breathe. You should have automatically got off his neck, and you should have automatically rendered aid. That did not happen. That made me really upset. as
Yeah.
being a law enforcement officer standpoint. And on the Taylor situation, it was one of those situations where, for me seeing, even dealing with us as uniform officers, we have to sometimes go with undercovers and do no-knock warrants and stuff like that. And that should have never happened as well. I know sometimes accidents happen and they go into the wrong house, but that should have been, lined up to the T. You can't just kick in somebody's door when you say, "Oh, it's an accident." I know that happened here in Houston a couple of years ago, and those officers got prosecuted.
Yeah.
So I feel it's the same instance where they need to get prosecuted for that. That's just in my opinion. A lot of people say, "Hey, I don't agree with it," but hey, that's their opinion, but that's mine. Just because I'm a cop doesn't mean I have to agree with everything that cops are doing.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and do you guys feel like, because you're Black police officers and these things that are happening to African American people that are being captured on video and being blasted out to the media, do you feel like that puts you all in like a awkward situation with work and with community? Like, do you feel like there's some tension there because of
Oh yeah, definitely. We, believe it or not, in my opinion, once again, I believe we get it worse than the white officers. I believe we get it worse because one, I've been to many of calls and just the way I've been treated, just because they don't know who I am. All they know is I'm a police officer that showed up at their doorstep. And the way I've been treated, they don't know me. They don't know how I'm going to handle a situation or not, So, I feel like I've been called everything from under the sun, just because I am I've been called traitors. I've been called all this, that, and the third. So I do believe that we have been getting it from both sides, and we are basically I've seen a couple of videos where Black officers even got into it with white officers during protesting, because they didn't like some of the things that they saw out there,
Yeah.
But, like I said, so, yeah, I, in my opinion, from what I've been through since everything is, I feel I've been getting it a lot worse, Some people may not agree, but I do.
Yeah. Desiree, is that your experience also? Do you feel like you've been getting it a little worse?
I think it all depends on the communities that you serve. Everybody in my community, for the most part, like my community is so small, everyone knows me. And so I don't feel like I get it as badly, but for a fact, I can't deny that I'm sure officers are getting it badly because of what's in the media, yes. Me personally, from the community, I'm not getting that. It's actually been the opposite for me. I've gotten more smiles, more "we support you, thank you for everything you're doing," from both Blacks, whites, Hispanics, everyone. I've been getting a lot more better treatment, actually.
Okay. So we have like society, we have just like humans and our mentalities, nobody's perfect. And we all like make mistakes. Some of us, we do a lot of things that we may believe may be right, but yet it's not. And it's all because we have different beliefs, on how we was raised, what we was taught. But as a citizen, when I make a mistake, I will be held accountable if caught, by law enforcement, within the courtroom, serving time, whatever the case may be. But when it comes to law enforcement, like when law enforcement actually catch certain infractions or involved in certain things that don't go too right, we have problems getting like body cam or, just getting the actual facts of the story. Like, how do we actually hold law enforcement accountable when things take place that's not right?
Mhm. I think it starts in the department. So, there's a tier. So you have regular patrol, and then you have a sergeant and a lieutenant and a captain and a chief, and it goes on and on and on and on. So the people that are supposed to hold those officers, whoever it is, it could be the captain that did something that was not right. There's someone above him that is supposed to hold him accountable. And that's what we run into. The higher ups aren't doing their part. They let a lot of stuff slide. They sweep a lot of stuff under the rug, depending on who you are, which officer you are. And that whole fraternity, looking out for each other, that's real. That's real. That's like a real thing. And so it starts there first. If the person that's supposed to punish me for doing something that I did wrong doesn't, then I'm going to continue to do things badly. I'm going to continue with my bad habits. Just like our kids, if you don't spank them, they're going to keep doing it. It's the same concept. So it starts with our own department first. Our department has to hold us accountable first, and then everything else should just fall into place.
Yeah.
I agree.
So I think so people, I mean, we're talking a lot about like what's been talked about in the media and like police accountability. And one of the things that has come up frequently is the idea of defunding the police, as a form of accountability or moving resources to say, well, if we address the root cause of the issue, then we might we might encounter less law enforcement interaction, and then we won't have some of the incidents that we're finding. What do you guys think about when you hear
like you said a real important key right there? You said less interaction. As far as less interaction, the police, I would say, is already short by thousands and thousands and thousands of officers just because of what's been going on over the years for the last 10, 20 years that's been came to light. Now it's coming to light because of social media, but it's been going on for centuries. But it's already been short because, of course, no one wants to be the police because no one wants to be in those shoes, right? So, like I said, we go out here every day, pick up calls all the time, and we'll go to a house. It'll be 2-3 hours, sometimes where we don't get to that citizen, and we're getting the back end of it just because we already don't have enough people as it is, and that's what I strongly, there's different. You can defund, but we have to make sure what we're defunding. I'm a strong believer in community policing. So there's different things that some police departments don't need. That they could use the money for something else, and that's in everything in life. And even in colleges and jobs where they use money for things that we don't need. And we could have used it for something else. And I feel that having less interactions with law enforcement crime will go up, because people will know that, you're gonna have those bad seeds that's gonna know that and say, hey, now it's time to go. Now we can do what we got to do, and then it's gonna shift and say, well, the police are not doing anything because the crime rate has gone up, So it's just one of those things. Is kind of it's a touchy. It's like, yeah, I get it and I don't get it, but that's my view on it.
Yeah.
I think maybe I look at it differently. So I actually agree that the police department has their hands in too many things. I think that people call the police for everything. When you call a firefighter, he's definitely coming to fight a fire. That's his duty, right? But you're calling the officer because your kid won't go to school. You're calling the officer because your kid disrespected you. You're calling the officer because you have a flat tire at the side of the road. You're calling a police officer because you have a snake in your tub. I've gotten a call for that. We get called for everything. So yes, our hands is in everything. We're too powerful. We have too many, yes, the police department needs to be defunded. I agree with that. We have our hands in too much stuff, and we need to have less duties, less things that we can enforce. I agree with that.
Right. Yeah. I believe in putting money into the community policing, active patrol. That's it. We don't need to be chasing squirrels because somebody's squirrels in the backyard running, stuff like that.
Well, see, and then it comes down to what is the definition of defunding? Because I've heard it both ways. I've heard it on a financial side. of, oh, we shouldn't be paying y'all all this money to kill us, right? And then and then I've heard it on, no, defunding as in we just want to give y'all less duties, less power.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that if people had more, or had, then they wouldn't go, and take or commit, like if they had grocery stores and food deserts, or, if they had transportation and it was easier for them to move around and get from point A to point B, or, if they had mental health institutions somewhere close that they can actually get to, or drug treatment facilities, I do believe it will be less crime in the communities. But we lack those areas in certain areas. It's like we have communities with no resources, and without resources.
Well, I mean, I think that's the thing, right? When we saying, okay, we looking at the police budget and they are massive compared to some of these other budgets. The question becomes why, and do we, like, if we experiment and say, well, let's shift some of those resources to funding some of these other things. If we see crime goes down, we say, hey, that worked. But if what happens, what Jerry is saying, and it doesn't go down and it increases, then people are going to still be up in arms. It doesn't mean we shouldn't try it, because I do think, there are things when you start looking at data and you start looking at research to say, we have a whole bunch of people getting calls, or police officers getting a lot of calls for mental health issues, or a whole bunch of people wind up in Harris County Jail because mental health issues. We need to actually address mental health, and we got to figure out how to fund it. And I'm not saying it all have to come from police budgets, but what we do know is mental health is in a budget deficit compared to what they might need, right? But then you listen to Jerry and he says, well, actually our department, and I mean, other people are saying it, like the police are in a budget deficit compared to what we believe we need. So I do think like these are conversations we have to continue to have. Unfortunately, everybody is not a part of the budget process. And sometimes they're not always as transparent as they should be upon them getting decided. Once the budget is out, it's over. It's like, oh, well, we allocated the money, it's over. But I do think, when budgets are made, there should be justification as to why this group is getting significantly less than another group, and what's
so when y'all speak about defunding, are y'all talking about the budget part of it or the duties to officers? I guess
think it would be both. I think it depends on the groups that you're talking to, because they're very different groups, and different in the way in which they're thinking about it. A lot of it is budget. I mean, it's both, right? So if I take your duties and responsibilities, you might not need as much in a certain budget to carry out those duties and responsibilities. And what we take can be used somewhere else in terms of financial resources.
Gotcha.
And that's what they were saying. I mean, we saw it with the city of Houston budget debate when they were like, well, HPD has this huge budget, but when we break down what other groups are getting, like education or public health, they're significantly lower. And the question is why? Why aren't these services being funded? And it has nothing to do with the police themselves. It's not their fault that the mayor or whomever is going to give them the money that they put in their budget request, right? Ultimately, it lies on the people who have to make the budget decisions to say, how do we shift this around to make sure everything that needs to get done is getting done?
Right.
And that we are not putting people in a deficit.
How do we make sure we protect our kids instead of over police our kids? How do we make sure our kids are safe in school instead of punish them when they make mistakes in school? Like that will be like some resources I believe should be like resourced somewhere else. So I mean,
Got you.
personally, like people say defund, I use resource or reallocate or move funds around, put them where they should go.
I mean, as it stands currently, if they're talking about defunding, if they want to pay me less money, then you definitely got to give me less duties. Because I'll give this badge up in a moment because I'm already underpaid for what I currently do. So that's how you're gonna be able to move it around. If you're gonna pay me less, I'll accept less, but I got to get less duties.
Yeah.
You can't pay me less and still expect me to do what I do. That's
I
not
felt like that as a teacher. You know, I was a teacher, I was a coach, I was a disciplinarian, I was a
counselor, everything.
psychologist.
You're everything as a teacher. You're the parent.
And I was
Everything.
like, come on, are you serious? Like,
It's the same way. It's like people call us for everything, and it's not. They call us for everything. When I tell you, kids that don't go to school in the morning, before they get to the teacher, sometimes they gotta deal with us, and we gotta be the parent. We have to be their parent because their parent
and their Uber driver. We gotta take them to school.
And their Uber driver. We have to be a psychologist. We have to be a social worker. We have to be everything. And there's a lot of duties, and our mind is everywhere, And I agree with Desiree, if they're gonna be fun and pay me less, because we're already not getting paid enough for what we do. Trust me, we're not. Trust me. Yeah. But then you're gonna have to take some of that weight off of us, take some of that weight off of us. And then that is putting money into more social stuff to allow, have those resources go to those homes and help these people, and sometimes we want to help, but we can't.
For the record, for those watching, I enjoy actually being a psychologist, a counselor, that part of the job doesn't bother me at all, actually. I enjoy interacting with the community on a different level. I don't want to always be taking people to jail.
Running.
Like, I didn't, what I'm saying? Yeah, so I want to make that clear. I'm not complaining. I enjoy the other parts of the job, but if you're going to pay me less, then the expectation should not be that I'm still doing the same thing that I do now.
So look, it's 8:02, right? And I have two very important questions that I want to ask you. I'm going to ask you in one. So if you could change anything about the way law enforcement work right now, what would it be? And give me your definition of justice.
Ooh.
I didn't hear the first part of the question. I heard the last part, definition of justice.
If you could change anything about law enforcement, what would it be? And tell me your definition of justice.
That's the tough. The first question is tough. So I'm gonna answer it backwards.
Okay.
The definition of justice to me is giving someone a punishment or an outcome that they clearly deserve in the courtroom amongst the judge and their peers. Police officers are not judge, nor are we jury. I think that justice should never be served before a person has the opportunity to get before a judge or a jury. That's the definition of justice for me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So while I'm thinking about the answer for my other question, Jerry, you got it.
It's the same. And justice, the definition of justice is basically treatment, behavior. I feel justice should never be. We as law enforcement shouldn't play judge, jury, and executioner, right? So I believe everyone should have the right to seek justice. I mean, no matter what they did, and it's a tough question. I mean, even as a law enforcement officer, I feel everyone has the right to justice. Everybody does.
Yeah. And if you guys could change one thing, just one.
Okay, so
Don't
if I could change.
if you, we wanna, we know y'all wanna get paid more because y'all do a dangerous.
No, not that.
nah, nah.
If I could change one thing about law enforcement, it would be the stigma attached to law enforcement. So if we could go back to the beginning of law enforcement and start from there and erase like just the mindset of officers and the mindset of the civilians towards officers, I would erase that. I think because that's the root of our issue, is just the way that we treat civilians and civilians treat us back. And so if we could go back to the very beginning, because we know what law enforcement initially was put in place for, right?
Mhm.
Everyone knows the history of that. And so if we can just erase those lines, start over fresh, and just delete the stigma attached to law enforcement, I think that would be a great help in a better direction for us.
Yeah,
Sure.
Jerry, if you could just
Change
change.
one thing in law enforcement.
Mhm.
I would say, to piggyback off of Desiree, I don't really want to, but that's like the biggest thing is basically to change the views that law enforcement have on the public and the public have on us, you know, because the law enforcement, there is people that have views on certain communities. They're like, oh, we're going into that community, watch out, we may get into something. That's not true, you know, so we need to change that mindset within the police department. And we need the public to also change the mindset of, oh, you're an officer, you're only here for one thing, is to kill me, lock me up, and do this. No, man, like, no, trust me. Not every officer is that way, you know, and I hear it all the time. Oh, every officer is the same, or you're an officer. No, change that mindset, you know, because that officer that could save your life tomorrow, you know, and you just, then what? You know, you had that mindset, and he could have been your savior the next day from a major car accident. He pulled you out from a burning building, you know. So we need to change the mindset on the community, and we need to change the mindset from law enforcement, you know, looking at the communities, because not just because, like he made a comment earlier, where we could use some of these resources for some of these communities that don't have, you know, and those usually are low urban income areas, and usually that's high crime areas, because law enforcement don't like going in those communities because they're just like, oh, you know, I don't want to go deal with those kind of people. Who's those kind of people? Those are people, you know.
Right.
That's people you're talking about, you know. Everybody needs help. So that's what I would change, is just the mindset of both the public and law enforcement, you know, because we all need change, not just one side. We all need change. And if we could change the mindset of everyone, I think it'll be okay, you know. It'll be okay.
Well, I think you
Next
guys,
time, go up to your, what was that?
and Desiree, one of the people in the audience said that you should be the police chief. They think you did a good job. But, you know, I think this conversation is necessary. I think a lot of times there are expectations of our Black police officers. Nobody, sometimes they're like, will us activists and advocates get in our conversations and we just talking to each other, you know, but I think it's important for us to engage with rank and file law enforcement, not just the high profile people, because those are the ones who are out in the streets dealing with the community every single day, you know, and we wanted to see how you guys felt, what you thought, and, you know, get your perspective on it and allow you to be seen too as human, like you're human. You're going through George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and, you know, Jacob Blake like we are, and maybe even in a worse way because you are Black in these situations. And so I think that's awesome, and we appreciate you both for coming on and wanting to be a part of the solutions, and Lord, so we can stop fanning the problems, because it is getting dangerous for everybody out here, and that just, we can't have that. Like, our communities have had enough. We've been through enough. So yeah, I appreciate it. Ro, do you have anything you want to say?
I mean, I just, you know, so much that we need to work on And the only way we're gonna change everything that need to be fixed, we literally gonna have to come together. People that's affected by the system, doctors, lawyers, law enforcement, judges, politicians, and we're gonna have to figure this out together. You know, and people who don't understand certain things need to stop making all the decisions for people that don't understand how certain things affect people, and they have to start listening to people that actually understand how it worked because they was affected by certain things. And we, as Pure Justice, we do a lot of work out here. We 501c3 nonprofit. And in order for us to keep going, you know, we need resources. So if you want us to be a resource for the community and, you know, to help assist and fix some of these things, because we're not waiting on government to come fix everything. Sometimes we got to get out here and do it ourselves. So if you want to assist us in to moving forward in whatever direction we choose to move forward, depending on the need at that time for the community, visit the website, purejustice.org. Be a resource for us so we could be a resource for other resources, as well as being a resource for the community. You know, I thank y'all for coming on the show. You two was amazing.
Thank
And,
you.
you
And
know,
let us know if you want to do it again, if there are things that we need to address. Other things like, for instance, the community policing, because it's something we support, but we want to know how people are defining that, because I think it looks different to certain people. I mean, I have to what it should look like and include, but it might mean something different from different groups. So thank you all for sharing your Thursday night. Jerry, thank you so much for talking to us. We hope you guys stay safe. Thank you for keeping us safe, and keep holding y'all counterparts accountable. We'll do our part as well.
you've been great.
Have a good night.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you so much for having us and giving us the opportunity to speak on certain things. I definitely appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I appreciate you guys for allowing me to come on here and talk and keep doing what you guys are doing. You know, we need more like you. You know, you guys are doing a phenomenal job, and you know, and just keep doing it, and you'll see the work. You put in the work's gonna come out. So
That's
you gotta
right.
keep doing it.
Absolutely. All right, y'all. Thank you for joining Talking Justice with Pure Justice, and we will see you soon. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.